He killed her husband with a bottle of tetrodotoxin. First, he searched the internet. He searched for the effects and dosage of tetrodotoxin. Then he purchased 15 grams of tetrodotoxin, and then injected the toxin into the yogurt her husband used to drink, and put it back in the refrigerator. When the unsuspecting husband drank the poisoned yogurt, he died soon after, and it was the same woman who called the police. She also confessed to the police. She told the police how the tetrodotoxin came about. But in court, the woman's defense attorney went off the deep end. She claimed that she bought the tetrodotoxin to commit suicide. She also produced a diagnosis of depression. The case has come to a weird and awkward situation, because the prosecutor, there is no evidence to prove that the woman has a motive to kill, based on the principle of benefit of the doubt, so he may be found not guilty. While he was at a loss, a colleague got a new information that made the case even more confusing. The woman was assaulted by a scumbag 6 years ago. And the man who assaulted her looked exactly like her dead husband. The only difference was the name. The prosecutor had their DNA compared, and sure enough, the dead man and the scumbag were one and the same. Then he came to the detention center, but the woman said they weren't the same person. The prosecutor didn't feel any remorse after being shut out. He went back to the woman's lawyer, because they were surprised to find this lawyer was the man's lawyer 6 years ago. He was the man's lawyer. 6 years ago, the lawyer defended the man. 6 years later, the lawyer defended the woman. Both times he defended criminals. Only the perpetrator and the victim were switched. Things got a little more interesting. After some probing, the prosecutor didn't have much to go on, so he continued his investigation into the man's identity. The prosecutor found a cellmate of the man's from when he was in prison. He told the prosecutor that the man hadn't gotten along since he was incarcerated. He kept to himself. Every time he was bullied, he would look at a picture of a woman. The prosecutor hurriedly took out the defendant's picture, but the cellmate said it wasn't him. The man worked as a technician at a foot spa after his release. The prosecutor immediately went to the foot spa. He finally found out about the man, and found out that he was in love with a female customer. Then he quit his job, and the female client was the defendant. Finally, the couple went from assault to reunion. They formed a closed loop. The prosecutor returned to the detention center. They used the evidence to question the defendant again. This time, they asked for his story. 6 years ago, they were co-workers. The man went to jail after he assaulted him, and he went into business. After 4 years he made a lot of money. He used to go to a foot spa to relax. Until that time, he opened his eyes and realized that the technician in front of him. Was the one who had assaulted him. He was so scared he couldn't speak. The technician spoke first.
我让他们给您换一个。不要。
When a man touches a woman's foot, he had a flashback of the pain he'd felt, but he held his tongue and let him go on. It's not the same now. She's not the little girl she used to be. Their positions have reversed. Back to the present. This woman won't go on again. The prosecutor had to investigate again. He found the woman's former colleague Mo. Asked him what happened 6 years ago. Mo said the three of them were co-workers 6 years ago, and the man was the leader. One day there was a company party. They were all drunk. The man asked Mo to help him bring the woman to the hotel. I didn't realize that the men were up to no good. They wanted to get rid of Mo. Mo went out as he was told. He waited for half an hour before calling the police. The prosecutor was puzzled and asked him, since he knew his boss was up to no good, why didn't he call the police beforehand? And the man said, because he never liked me. In front of me he was always proud like a princess. So I wanted a truth, a fact that would make him proud, a fact that makes him proud in front of me, so that he could accept me. After the male leader was imprisoned, Mo has been taking care of women with ulterior motives. They started their own business. The business became more and more prosperous. They made a lot of money. They lived in the best house in the city. But over the years, the women were always blind to his feelings. Mo couldn't wait any longer. On the woman's birthday, suddenly took out a ring and proposed to her, and told her that he was the one who called the police. I thought I'd get everything I wanted at the end of the lick. I didn't expect to be slapped in the face. The woman had already seen through his mind. In his eyes, all his aggressors are more responsible than Mo. At least he admitted his guilt in court. After release from prison, they start from the bottom, instead of Mo's inferiority complex. And he had a crush on this man before the murder. That's why he went to the foot spa. He continued to look for men to massage. As time passes, A feeling of fondness develops between the two of them. An absurd but reasonable story is complete. Then why did the woman kill the man? What's the reason for the love-hate relationship? Why was the dead man's name changed from Sui Cheng to Lu Muyang? Changed it to Lu Muyang. The prosecutor sent someone to the police station to check. He found a homeless man. The prosecutor called him as a witness. The homeless man cut off his long hair and looked exactly like the victim. He said the defendant bought his ID card. He told the truth. When he was dating the victim, I was watching a live broadcast. He found a homeless man who looked exactly like him. In order to say goodbye to the past, in order to start a new life, he found the homeless man to buy an ID card. The two of them went to another city. They got married and started over. The case became clearer and clearer. All that was left to convict the woman was the motive. The prosecutor then summoned Mo and asked him to tell the rest of the story, because he provided the motive for the murder. Mugata talked about his part. 2 years ago, the woman he was doing business with suddenly disappeared. After so many years of love, how could Mo let go so easily? Luckily, his cell phone is tied to the woman's car. Violation records are sent to his cell phone. Through this information, he found another city. After a few days at the violation site, he suddenly saw his former male leader. Sensitively, Mordecai followed the man to his home. Sure enough, he found the woman he'd been longing for. Look at the woman you love. I'd rather be with a man who violated her. But she doesn't like herself. Who has given so much to her? Mo couldn't figure it out, so he began to kill his heart. He went into the woman's flower store. He pretended to be calm and exchanged pleasantries with him. When he saw his ring, he went straight to the point. He and the woman's husband were old friends. They knew each other before they started working. Since childhood, they've always had a favorite woman. But not you. His words, the woman may not take it seriously at first, but the seed of doubt has been planted, and it will take root. From then on, a woman is always watching her husband's behavior. For example, when she talks to strangers on the phone, she'd start listening in. After her husband falls asleep, she'd start looking through the phone records, although she didn't find any evidence. But her suspicions grew. When the suspicion started, the charge was already established. One night, her husband said he had to go out on an errand. He sensed something was wrong. He followed him secretly. And sure enough, he did. He saw her husband hugging another woman. She was devastated. Under the great psychological shock, she had a miscarriage. This was the last straw that broke the camel's back. The woman's love turned to hate. She blamed her for everything, and the way to make her pay: a bottle of 15 grams of tetrodotoxin. The case finally came to a head. The woman killed her husband with her own hands, but the lawyer still refused to give up. This woman, who obviously still has a secret, she wanted to get a lighter sentence for the defendant. He taught him how to tell a lie of marital rape by her husband, to make the murder of his husband, to make the murder of his own husband a little more normal, and to make it more believable. The lawyer even helped him to specify the time and the weather. But all of this had no effect. In front of the strict prosecutor, he pulled up the weather forecast. For the time period the female defendant claimed, there was no weather as he claimed. The two of them were caught in a lie. Not only that, the prosecutor went to great lengths. To find security footage of the men on that secret date. The female defendant never knew. The woman never knew who her husband was meeting with. And in the surveillance video, she saw the woman who hugged her husband was his attorney. But how did the prosecutor know? It turns out that when he visited the lawyer that day, I saw a portrait on the wall of his office, but it was too amateurish. But the prosecutor suddenly remembered that the deceased loved to paint. He photographed it and contacted the victim's cellmate. He was sure that the painting of the deceased that he had seen in the prison, it was this woman. It turns out, the woman the victim loved so much before he died was him. The lawyer was silent for a moment and finally told the truth. It turns out that he and the victim were childhood friends, but their relationship stopped at brother and sister. They didn't go any further, but she was always in love with her. Until that day, the deceased called him. He told the lawyer that he was married, and his wife was pregnant. It turns out the man was only there to share his joy. At the end, the two men hugged and wished each other well. An ordinary meeting turned out to be the trigger of the case. It's true that he never questioned her husband. It was only because of his jealousy and low self-esteem. He killed a man who loved him by mistake, but the mistake was irreparable. In the end, the woman was sentenced to death. She was sentenced to death. Puffer fish is a delicacy of great flavor, but if you want to taste it, you have to risk being poisoned to death. It's both delicious and deadly. It's like love.